This is everything I have to eat in a day to cycle across Japan. On the docket for today, we've got about 54 miles from Kita Kyushu to Hofu. So I opted for an efficient and free start to the day with the complimentary hotel breakfast. With these, sometimes the pickings are good, but today they were not. You win some, you lose some. But regardless, I tossed that kid down the hatch and got rolling for my final push out of Kyushu, finally marking our completion of the first major island of the trip. But just before the bridge out, I passed through a little street market with lots of interesting merchants and vendors, so I picked up a quick smoothie right before crossing into Chugoku via their underground walkway. I was curious to see if there were any marked differences between the islands, and to my surprise, there actually were. Right after crossing over, the roads were much less upkept, and I am not exaggerating when I say I saw maybe 300 or 400 pee bottles discarded on the side of the road along the way. Anyway, after exiting the urine graveyard, there was a nice little roadside drive-in that was famous for the area's local specialties. So I tried their famous clam miso soup and finally got some stir-fried hodumon. When ordering it, I didn't know what this was, but I've seen it on a ton of different signs and menus, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Turns out that hodumon is stir-fried intestines, which I actually don't mind, and I would probably even venture to say that when served with some cabbage and spicy miso, they're kind of elite. The clam soup was good as well, but there was kind of a lot of sand in it. Now, the second half of today's riding was much more enjoyable. Less pee, more farmland, traditional homes, and I even passed the USA at one point before checking into my $32 a night hotel. Now, if you guys have a keen eye, you might notice that almost all of these countryside hotels I stay in look pretty much the same, and this comes as a result of the massive development boom of domestic travel infrastructure in the 70s through 90s during Japan's economic boom. But when the subsequent crash came in the 90s, this effectively left in place all of these then modern hotels, but they no longer had the money to keep them modernized, basically leaving them sort of locked in time as the closest thing to a time capsule into that period. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. For dinner, I hit this super solid pizzeria serving some authentic Italian fare like this little sausage arancini and this pizza if it didn't have little hot dogs on it. And for dessert, I rounded off the day with a quick protein bar run. See you guys tomorrow. Today, we've got an early start so we can get up and rolling on our 114-kilometer ride from Hofu to Hiroshima. But first, it's time for a quick hotel breakfast run. Not gonna lie, the hotel itself looks mildly bleak from a visual standpoint. However, I was pleasantly surprised with their breakfast lineup. It had many of the usual dishes, but a lot of options and solid quality. Not bad for a breakfast included with my $32 a night room. As I got pushing, the ride sliced through lots of small towns and beautiful farming villages, which eventually led me up to this little teishoku spot for lunch. It looked quite local, so I tossed on some pants to perhaps cut down on the amount of eyeballs I'd pick up. This was ineffective. Inside, they had lots of old school decor and some hand-drawn menus, so I decided to go with their yakiniku hot plate lunch set for about $7, which came with a few different sides and a healthy pile of rice. It's kind of bananas that I got this freshly cooked spread for pretty much the same price as a Big Mac meal. The remainder of today's route entailed a little bit more highway riding and a few more passes through small local villages until I finally rolled into my hotel in Hiroshima, which set me back about $45. Now, today's ride was on the thicker side, so I knew I had to stop at one of the places in Japan that you can find basically everywhere and can almost always expect huge meal options. Hear me out, an Indian restaurant. I didn't have any nearby Indian spots growing up, so I've been trying to make up on some lost time here and decided to order this pretty spectacular dinner set that came with about a meter of naan, some sides, a salad, soup, rice, a drink, a dessert. I also ordered some additional tandoori as well, and altogether this brought the price point to about $24, which I honestly think isn't that bad at all for what I got. But regardless, I'll see you guys tomorrow. On the docket for today, we've got about 69 kilometers from Hiroshima to Mihara. The original plan was to push to the famous ramen city Onomichi, but there were basically no affordable hotels there, which does happen from time to time. As I got moving for today's ride, I decided to keep breakfast on the lighter side today with just a few deep breaths as I pushed out of Hiroshima. Typically, cycling out of big cities is kind of annoying due to all the traffic and stops, but here, there was this gorgeous riverside bike path that carried me all the way out of the city and into the mountains, where I got to stop for my first actual bite of the day at this restaurant with the hardest name of all time, Gravy Jack. I honestly think I'm gonna steal that name for my firstborn, boy or girl. Despite it being kind of in the middle of nowhere, there was a pretty thick wait, but when my time finally came, I stepped up to the plate and ordered their monster third burger. When they brought me out some plastic gloves to eat it with, I knew I made the right pick. This burger is loaded up with some thick buns, 3 patties, lettuce, tomato, onion, 2 types of cheese, duck, a pork roast cutlet, chicken, ham, bacon, a soft-boiled egg, mayo, Thousand Island, black pepper, gravy sauce, beef sauce, and tartar sauce. It's a little pricey, but if you're passing through, it's a solid meal. Not gonna lie, I was kinda curious as to how the old tummy would hold up with about 5 pounds of burg in tow, but it honestly took it like a champ as I pushed through a decent bit of climbing and highway riding as I rolled into Mihara. My hotel room for the evening certainly seemed to be well loved over the years, but it's what was available, and it even happened to be a smoking room with decades of aroma infused into the walls, free of charge. Then for dinner, I had to get back on the Japanese food train and hit this ramen shop that was right next to my hotel, where I picked up this decent set including some Yokohama-style Ike ramen, which is known for its porky, creamy broth, and also a side order of karage with some mayo. The spread was a bit expensive for what it was, but I learned after the meal that it actually also came with unlimited self-serve rice that I completely missed. Never again. See you guys tomorrow. The day has finally come for us to cross 60 kilometers from Mihara to Imabari via the world-famous Shimanami Kaido. But first, the morning had quite the eventful start.
Interesting morning so far. People came into my room on 2 separate occasions, one at around 8 a.m., one at around 9:30. I think they work for the hotel. Not sure.
Anyway, after being compelled to begin my day, I rolled over to the nearby ferry port to cop a ticket from Mihara to Setora, where after arriving I was quickly able to find some breakfast at this unmanned farm stand that was selling the area's famous citrus fruits. For only about 100 yen, I rocked with this bag of oranges which were absolute money. Juicy, fresh, zesty. From here, there was also a cool roadside rest stop nearby serving tons of local dishes for the travelers passing through. I decided to go with their local Setora lemon ramen and a fried beef mince cutlet from a local butcher. Citrus is a note in ramen that I haven't tried elsewhere, but it honestly worked so well to cut through the salt and fat of the broth. The cutlet was also a juicy and crispy fella as well. On the way out, they had some unique ice cream where I went with a mix between their salt and hasaku flavors. FYI, hasaku is a local hybrid between mandarins and pomelos. Exquisite. The remainder of the Shimanami Kaido was absolutely beautiful riding. Smooth roads, wide shoulders, well-labeled bike paths, and tons of gorgeous bridge crossings as I passed all the way into the historic port city of Imabari. Because this is a popular cycling area, my hotel actually allows you to bring your bike into your room, so I rolled around in and then bounced over to this nearby yakitori place. Now, because today's ride was on the milder side, I just ordered a few different skewers and sides, including this wasabi yakitori that absolutely flashbanged me. However, for me the big standouts today were my sweet chicken nanban, this yakitori with mint and plum sauce, and also their it's like plum wine but without alcohol, which brought today's total to $80.93. See you guys tomorrow. So, the plan for today is to take on my biggest day of riding yet at around 170 kilometers from Imabari to Tokushima. This is probably going to take me about 10 hours or so. So, to get on the road as early as possible, I hit my hotel breakfast right when it opened. And let me just say, as soon as I saw the lineup, I knew it was going to be a good day. Compared to most hotel breakfasts in Japan, this place is one of the very few that aren't afraid to bless your boy with a little bit of protein. Now, is it the optimal pre-workout option? Perhaps not, but I wholeheartedly refuse to only eat carbs when at a buffet. As I got moving, the ride kicked off with these beautiful long stretches of empty rural roads and a little bit of propaganda before I rolled into a cafe for my first pit stop of the day. Online, I saw that they had these voluptuous fruity waffles, and you guys were gonna be like, oh my gosh, Josh, that looks so good. We love you so much. But unfortunately, you can't order those until later because I guess waffles are technically considered desserts here. I know. Blasphemy. So instead, I got some non-dessert cream-filled matcha roll cake and also another non-dessert ice cream sundae, which were both delicious, but felt a little more desserty than the sweet little waffle that I longed for. As I put my rubber back to the road, I set off into the mountains for a few thousand vertical feet of climbing and highway riding as I pushed to this famous udon shop that's apparently supposed to be a must-stop if you're passing through. Here, they serve bowls of handmade udon made fresh, and while you're waiting for your food, you can go and pick whatever fried tempeh tempura or oden you'd like to supplement your meal with. I decided to go with some squid, octopus, and kakiage. Back at the table, I ordered a bowl of their beef udon and decked it out with some of their self-serve soy sauce, sesame, tempura, and ginger. For me, I typically go for ramen over udon if I have the choice, but in this case, the broth was light and sweet and the noodles were super fresh and bouncy. And altogether, everything cost me less than $7. Now, I've got about 70 kilometers left in the day and the clock is ticking. So aside from a hydration stop or two, I cranked out the remainder of my ride through some quiet mountain roads and was even fortunate to find a nice bike path as I rolled into Tokushima after about 105 miles of riding and having listened to the entirety of The Hobbit from start to finish. As you all know, I take my nutrition and recovery very seriously. So, to patch myself back up, I was able to make it to this little karage spot right before it closed. On their menu, they offer sizes ranging from a little bit to medium. So, I went with their medium size, which packed around 20 pieces of chicken and came with some rice, soup, and a few different sides. The chicken was nice and crispy on the outside, but still hot and juicy on the inside. The total spend for today was a little over $100, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. On the docket for today, we're hitting about 75 miles from Wakayama to Kyoto, so I got up bright and early to get moving. But first, I stopped for some breakfast at what was pretty much the only spot open near me, Royal Host. You can find these all over Japan, and they're basically a family-type diner with a nice self-service drink bar and a fat menu including Japanese and Western options. I was curious to see their take on a Western breakfast, so I went with a nice well-rounded spread of some corn soup, salad, an acai bowl, a stack of pancakes, and an order of bacon and eggs with some rolls and yogurt on the side. Not a bad start to the day. Though it wasn't as sweet and decadent as some of the American chains back in the States, the food tasted clean and provided a nice carb up for the ride ahead. Today's route is pretty much all through urban areas, so after covering a little bit of ground, I made it to my first 7-Eleven stop where I was greeted by an army of advertisements bordering on propaganda. For what, you might ask? Well, of course, it's 7-Eleven's brand new crispy chicken with rich butter soy sauce. Nice try, marketing team, but I just decided to roll with a couple Aquarius Zeros to fuel my passage through the busy streets of Osaka. Now, I planned my route so I would hit this place serving these giga lunch sets, but I underestimated just how much stoplights would slow me down. So, by the time I got there, they had already closed. But fret not, my friends. When in doubt in Japan, there's almost always going to be an Indian restaurant within reasonable proximity, and today was no different. I decided to go with the curry lunch set with some cheese naan, tandoori chicken, soup, salad, and lassi. Then, to bolster the spread, I also grabbed some momos as well. Generally, Indian food in Japan always runs a little bit sweeter and less spicy, however, it does not miss. Also, I'm not sure if I just got lucky, but in every shop I've been to, the owners are ultra friendly as well. The remainder of my ride pushed through the suburbs running between Osaka and Kyoto, and a few hours later than expected, I finally made my way into Kyoto and checked into my super run-of-the-mill hotel that ran me about $80. Then for dinner, it was getting kinda late, so I headed over to Kyoto University to try this late night spot that's super popular with the students there. Here, they specialized in jumbo fried chicken cutlets, so I decided to go with their 2 jumbo cutlet combo using all 4 of their house sauces, including ketchup and onion American sauce, cheese, grated ponzu sauce, and sweet and spicy red miso sauce. Each of the sauces had its own unique flavor ranging from sweet to umami, the portions were generous, and the value for the price is pretty hard to beat. The total price for the day was about $125, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Today, we've got a thick one ahead at a little under 80 miles from Kyoto to Gifu. So I got up bright and early to make the push out of Kyoto and past this absolutely gigantic graveyard on the outskirts of the city. For my first stop of the day, I wanted to get nice and carved up for the ride ahead, so I went to this Hawaiian spot serving some strawberry banana pancakes topped with a tower of whipped cream. The pancakes themselves were nice and fluffy, and despite the whipped cream being served by the leader, when paired with the fresh fruits, it actually wasn't too sweet or rich. After the meal, I remounted the steed and was super fortunate to have a nice long push through some super serene rural riding, which ultimately led me to this conveyor belt sushi spot for lunch. This place is called Sushiro, and it's a chain that you can find all over Japan. And my favorite part is you don't have to talk to any other humans from when you enter to when you leave. Everything is ordered on a tablet and comes straight to your table via the conveyor belt. Today, I went with a pretty fat assortment of dishes, including hamburger sushi, sushi, fried octopus, a bunch of different variants of shrimp and tuna pieces, some udon, and a lot more, ultimately tallying up to a total of 12 plates for just over 16 bucks. Then for the remainder of my ride, I had a little bit more highway riding, some passes through industrial areas, and even my first peek at the Japanese Alps that I'll be pushing into soon. And for dinner, I stopped at this shop selling the perfect thing after a long day of riding. A huge bowl of their hearty miso ramen loaded up with tons of bean sprouts, garlic, pork back fat, and a massive piece of fried chicken. It also came with unlimited self-serve rice, and interestingly, they also offered chicken tikka on the side as well. In my opinion, this is world-class comfort food. The broth was insanely salty and rich, the noodles were thick and chewy, and everything had a healthy dose of oil that coated the soul quite nicely. Then I wrapped up the night at my hotel for about 5,600 yen, which brought today's total to just under 80 bucks. See you guys tomorrow. On the agenda for today, we've got a nice and easy 36-mile trot from Gifu into the small mountain village of Gujo. So I loaded up the old rig and hit the road. To fuel up for my push into the mountains, I went to this 113-year-old Japanese home selling traditional Japanese goodies. And here, I copped this dango fruit zenzai, which is basically an assortment of fruits and a skewer of glutinous rice balls, all resting in a bowl of cold and sweet red bean soup. And to accompany that, I also got a breakfast set with a little salad, an egg, some toast, and a matcha latte. Honestly, it seemed like a pretty bougie meal to me, but in the end, it only ran me about 12 bucks. As I got moving, this felt like the first time I was really getting into the mountainous wilds of Japan. There were long, winding rivers, small mountainous villages, and lots of beautiful bridge crossings. As I made my way into Gujo, this place looked pretty sick. Same traditional vibes of Kyoto, but not crowded at all. So I pulled up to this fancy Japanese curry spot and was served right away. First, I got some craft ginger ale for an absolutely bananas 800 yen, and also a mixed curry platter with 2 curries and some supplemental vegetation. It was quite pricey, but I think it was an excellent pick considering it was the only place open in town. Now, tonight, I'm staying in a traditional Japanese guest house that's built right on the river. It has some nice shared bathing facilities, a traditional futon, and even this little sitting area to take in all the sights and sounds of the flowing river right outside your room. Then for dinner, this was a struggle. The town feels borderline abandoned. I literally tried 4 different spots and all of them were closed until I eventually found one selling the most traditional Japanese cuisine I've had this whole trip. I got a flight of 3 river fish, some pickled vegetables, rice, tofu, and miso soup. Not gonna lie, I read that the real OG way to eat these fish was in their entirety, bones and all, and I was not a fan of that. The bones and organs of the fish are super bitter in a way that doesn't really enhance the eating experience at all, so next time I'll probably just stick with the flesh. Then back at the inn, I crushed a little bit of tea and senbei and called it a night. I'll see you guys tomorrow.